Hello, my name is Melissa Wendell, and I am here to do my first video ever. Pretty excited. I'm going to call this video Perfectly Perfect Me, for you shall be perfectly perfect you. If I was to give 5 words of advice in this life, this is what it's going to be. But first I have to ask you to see if you're the type of person that would like the type of person who I am. Have you always felt very sensitive to other people's energies? Have you always felt like you could feel what they're thinking or feel what they're feeling? Have you ever walked down the street being in a perfectly great mood and then all of a sudden you just feel cranky or irritated or really angry all of a sudden? It's probably because you are a highly sensitive human being, as I am. And I have gone through a path in my life which is still a young path, and I still have lots to grow and to go. But I have realized some of these energies are not always mine, and therefore I don't always wish to carry them. And if you're like me, you'd much rather have your own energy and not feel everybody else's energy. Do you also have a racing mind where you can always hear other people's conversations and other people's thoughts, and conversation you had just repeats and repeats and repeats in your head all day and all night long, and you just can't get rid of it? Yes, this is all part of the wonderful world of energy, and we live in it every day in spirituality. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Melissa Wendell. I am 32 years old. I live in a little town called Longmont, Colorado. It's not that little anymore. It's actually getting kind of big and growing, as we all should be every day. I have lived this life of spirituality probably my whole life. When I was a little girl, I used to see spirits and ghosts by my bedside. I did not quite know what they were. They never harmed me. They always gave me a path to walk through them. But I just always feel them and see them. My sister also saw them too, and then comes to find out that my sister was older than me. She is older than I am. So she was able to see what they looked like more clearly than I could. And it turned out, upon discussion with my family, that they were all of our ancestors. Lovely, lovely ancestors, our heritage, our roots. And shortly after that, I haven't seen much of them, but I have definitely felt them my whole life. And now I have a 6-year-old daughter who is beautiful and gorgeous and everything I could ever hope and wish for. But she is also extremely sensitive and sees things just like I do and did. And then it wasn't until I was 18 and I decided to pack up and move with a bicycle, some clothes, and a sleeping bag to Portland, Oregon, with 2 people that I barely knew. One I didn't know really at all, just on a whim to try something new. And that's when I noticed that things just weren't quite right. I remember walking down the Pioneer Square in downtown Portland, Oregon, and something really strange would happen. I would be walking down the street, and I felt like anytime I made eye contact with somebody, I could just see right through their soul. I could see everything. And one day I was walking, and I walked by this young gentleman, and I looked into his eyes. We made eye contact, and it was like I went through a black tunnel with shards of glass flying everywhere. And after that, I realized I didn't like that. And so I started wearing sunglasses, and surprisingly and amazingly, the sunglasses truly worked. It was almost like it acted like a protection, so I couldn't see through so much. It was almost like a wall that I had put up between me seeing through their soul and possibly them seeing through mine. And then I moved to California and had a lot of spirituality happen there. And then I moved into a truck. I bought a little truck, and I made a bed in the back seat, in the back of the bed. It was perfect. It was really cute. Did it all myself. Very proud moment. My co-pilot was my fish, Baby on Meal. He was really cute too. And I decided that I didn't know where I wanted to live, but I had to move out of there. But let me back up first. I went to go visit my mom in Florida when I was living in California. And while I was there, she took me to my first psychic reading by a medium. Oh, which, let me tell you, this is what I do for a living. I am a psychic intuitive healer, reader. I've just come to terms with the word psychic because it's a hard one. Lots of people have lots of old programming, old memories, very strict thoughts about it. So I've always stayed away from the term psychic for the worry that people might not like it, but it's what I am, so I'm just going to start owning it. And I'm also a medium, which a medium is those who connect to those who have passed over, who are trying to communicate with us that are still alive, and it is by far one of my favorite things to do. And then I also communicate with those who are still alive that are trying to communicate but just don't have the words to say it out loud. Which I'm sure we know lots of people like that have a hard time communicating. Probably more than we like, but that's okay. And then I also do a type of Reiki angel healing, clearing, where I bring in your angels and your spirit guides and I communicate with them, and together we work on clearing out any stuck energies in your body or anything that's no longer serving a purpose. I highly believe that what we think in our mind affects how we feel spiritually and emotionally, and then it creates our body and how our body functions, considering that our body is one large living organism that is constantly moving and is full of energy. It's a constant motion of energy, that anything that we think, act, or create is our reality. And it can, over long term, if you are not thinking positive, clear thoughts, it can create disease in your body, physical pain, ailments. For just a quick reference, lots of times our body runs in two ways, where the left side of the body is the part of the body that receives energy, and the right side of the body is the part that releases energy. So I always find it interesting, those who have a hard time receiving and allowing great things to come into their life usually hurt the left side of their body. And those who have a hard time of letting anything go and hold on to everything with their dear might, or anger, or can't let go of hurt feelings, usually end up being on the right side of the body. So what I do is I go in with the angels and we go and we clean all that out, and I receive the messages, and then I help I should say, the spirits above, the great holy divine, and myself help, and you, the practitioner in front of me, the client, help open up and heal. And it's really great. And I also have to say that I'm so blessed that those that come to me with two things: wanting to grow and wanting to do the work. And those that come to me with those two things are the ones who I see succeed and flourish and shine more than anyone else. So back to my story so I went to visit my mom in Florida, and she brought me to this lady at this church, and she was a psychic, never seen a psychic before. And at first I went into the bathroom, and there was this weird room before you went into the bathroom, and there was this rocking chair. And I saw this old lady turn into a little girl, turn into a middle-aged woman, turn into an older woman again, holding a baby. And so then I go into the room to meet the psychic, and I ask her, I'm like, is there somebody that sits in that rocking chair in the bathroom? And I explained to her what this person looked like. She said yes, and she goes in all those stages. I was like, oh, that's pretty phenomenal. So then she ends up telling me about my life situation, and she calls in and she was a medium, which I didn't know what a medium was at that point. And she tells me that a grandpa comes in, who I don't think I've ever met because I never looked like anyone in my family, but she says I look exactly like him, so he must have been passed over before I was born into this day and age. And then my spirit guide, my big, beautiful, lovely spirit guide, who I love so much, came in and told me that the situation that I was in a bad situation, that what seemed to be okay and working with me at that moment was going to get really bad, like on a physical level, because the relationship I was in, the man was very controlling, and he was emotionally starting to control me, mentally starting to control me, and pretty soon it was going to be physically controlling me. And so I went home and I really thought about that, and that man kept coming into my life who had always kind of kept it in arm's reach but was slowly starting to let him in, and I started to realize, wow, she might be really right. And that's when I decided I needed to leave this town, which was in Northern California, Humboldt County. So I decided to buy my truck and packed it up with a few things that I owned and set off for the coast, because I didn't quite know where I wanted to live. So I thought, well, the best way to go is to travel and then end up where I end up, to see the place that I like the most. And so I took Highway 1 from Northern California, Arcata, Eureka area. Well, once I could hit Highway 1, and traveled the whole coast of California all the way down to San Diego. And people that I would meet along the way, and people that I knew right before I was leaving, kept asking me, aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? And I kept being like, no, I'm not allowed to have fear, because the moment I have fear is when everything will change. I was like, I have zero fear in me. I had a can of mace that I had no idea had to work, and 2 days before my trip, somebody had gifted me a knife, because it was the only thing that I needed was a knife, and it was a very dull knife that within weeks after my trip ended fell apart into pieces. And that was it. I had a dull knife and a can of mace I didn't know how to use, and my fish, baby, on meal. And there I was, just me and the road and the future ahead. And it was amazing. It was probably the best experience of my life that I will take with me forever. It gave me so much strength and courage. I was 22-ish, I think, almost about to be 23. No cell phone, so just use payphones. My mom bought me a calling card, so that was nice of her. And I went all the way down to San Diego. I took about 2.5 weeks to travel all of California, and then went up to Vegas. And then I went to Arizona. And something happened when I was in Arizona that kind of shifted my whole world. I woke up one night in a bad storm. The truck was blowing and washing everywhere, so I moved the truck to a different location. And I ended up in Sedona, Arizona, which was the highlight of my trip. To be this very spiritual person, to be in a place where there's these massive, beautiful vortexes that are supposed to bring out all this wonderful, great energy. Well, what happened was it brought out all the fear in me. It brought out the thing that was deeply centered that I wasn't allowing to come out. And I woke up in the middle of the night to my truck rhythmically rocking, and when I would sit up it would stop, and when I laid back down it would start again. And I had a really bad nightmare about a man who drove up in this white Suburban and got in arm's length of me and shot me, but somehow missed me and was trying to kill me, and I couldn't figure out how to use my mace or my dull knife. And so then the next day, I traveled to this place in Arizona, outside of Phoenix, and it was the only time I used the rest stop, which I'd promised my grandma I would never use the rest stop, and it was the only time I did, because it was partially in town, and it didn't look that weird, so I stopped and I used it, and when I got out, there was this man sitting there, and I remember looking at him and thinking, my truck's not going to start, and it's going to be because of that man. And I went to get in my truck, and it wouldn't start. And it wasn't the battery, it wasn't the starter, it was something that was different, like something I didn't recognize. And this man walks up. It is the exact same man from my dream the night before. And the crazy thing was where I was, it was getting dark. I broke down right outside a bar at the rest stop, and it felt really scary there. And so it felt less scary to go with him. So I went with him. His ex-girlfriend shows up because she wants to take him and I out for a drive, and she pulls up in the exact same white Suburban that was in my dream. And I'm like, there's no way I'm getting in that vehicle with you. And so then I get in the vehicle, and I start to go. And I pick up these 3 rocks. I mean, they're literally this big, like so tiny. And I was like, this is all I got. Like, I'll just throw rocks at them. And we drive in the middle of the desert. They end up smoking meth all night long. Craziest things happen. I don't even know. I get home safe, well-ish. I don't really have a home. And then I get back to my truck in the morning, and he's like, I'm going to go find you help. And he disappears. And like 5 minutes later, 12 people show up, all methed out looking. But like long-term methed out, like been doing it for years. And they're like, oh, we heard that you broke down. They don't even know the guy that I just talked to, because I asked him, I was like, oh, did you talk to this guy? And they said, oh, no, we don't know who that is. And I was like, okay. And they're like, get in your truck, we're going to tow you. And so they tow me. But long story short, I ended up being safe and okay. We ended up, my timing chain guides had shredded in my truck, and we had to pull apart the whole front engine and fix it. And I met one of my guardian angels. So they pull me up to their lot, which is a junkyard, and this is what they do for a living. They take abandoned vehicles and own them. And they pull me up, and I get there, and the day goes on. We figure out what's wrong with the truck. All of them are there. And then towards the end of the night, this guy comes up to me, and he's an older gentleman, probably in his 40s or 50s, scraggly long hair, missing teeth, pretty much bones, skin and bones, and asks me if I want to go to the bar and have a drink. And I just thought to him, like, you must be crazy. There's no way I'm going with you. But then the other part of me was like, I really could use a drink right now. I have nothing else to do. So I was like, fine, I'll go. I went with him. This man ended up being my guardian angel. He was amazing. He had the most magnificent story. He actually had won $1 million, lost it all, got stuck in this town, and then became back on meth again. Had the most up and flowy life. And the most amazing part was every time I would leave my truck, I would lock it all up. And I would go to the gas station and like get food or something, and I would come back and all the windows would be down, the stereo would be blasting, the back of the truck would be open, the doors would be wide open, the hood would be up, and I would look at them and be like, how did you guys get in my truck? And they'd be like, oh, this is what we do for a living. I'm like, right. And this guy, the guy that was my guardian angel, looked after me that whole time and made sure that I was safe and taken care of and nobody hurt me, and would watch over my truck when I would leave. And so part of that is that we should never judge people, because you never know who is your secret angel inside and who's the one that is going to protect you and look after you. And they come in all forms. And I think about the town that I broke down in. There was probably 2,000 people in that town, and 99% of them were addicted to meth and had been for years. That a normal looking person would have never fit into that town. He had to come in the shape of somebody else that looked like meth, that had done meth, because that's the only way he would have been accepted. And so you never know who your angels are, so you should always be open and welcome different people into your life, because you never know who's going to change it in a beautiful way. And the other part of that, of my success around that, was the fear that my whole trip ended up being perfect. It was amazing. But the moment that I allowed that fear to overcome and overtake me was the minute that my whole entire trip fell apart. And I remember the night that I woke up with my truck rocking, the next morning I went on this hike. And I kept getting, it was so hot, and I kept getting lost in the urban desert. It was awful. And I came back, and my fish also was very hot and had baked in the sun and had died on my trip. So I buried baby Emil in the Red Sea of Sedona, Arizona, the Red Sea of dirt. And I sat at the road and I cried and I screamed and I hollered at the universe. And it was the first time that I had let that fear and that sadness overcome me. And after that moment, my whole life shifted. My whole trip shifted. So then I get my truck fixed in Arizona, and then I drive 800 miles to New Mexico, and my whole life shifted again. my mom told me I had to go meet my great aunt, who I was like, okay, and she's like, she's different, I just have to warn you. And I looked at her, I'm like, Mom, I've met different in our family, I don't want to meet her. And I go, and she's like, no, Ma, she's like, no, Melissa, you need to go check on her. So I go and I meet her, and I knock on this door of this house, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm in for. Never seen a picture of this lady, nothing. She opens the door. It is this 80-year-old woman who is easily 4 inches taller than me. I'm 5'3", in this rainbow-colored tutu, or not tutu, but muumuu, those robe things, with the brightest, sparkliest blue eyes I've ever seen. And I just look at her and I'm like, get over here, I just want to hug you and squeeze you and kiss you. She told me so much about my family that I had no idea of. She actually introduced to my family a religion called Eckankar, and she was kind of the one that was the founder of it in our family, and that my whole entire family was extremely spiritual and religious in that aspect, and definitely believed in spirits and ghosts and divine powers and all of this. And my mom had never told me this my whole entire life. And later when I asked my mom, she was like, just told me I wanted you to find your own path, whatever way it was. So that was definitely another part of my awakening. And then later, the next day, I went for a drive, and the rod in my engine blew, and so I got towed back home to Colorado. That was a sad, sad day, but it ended up being the biggest blessing. I moved back to Colorado. My dad and uncle came and towed me home. That was a fun adventure. And I was mad. I was pissed for a whole entire year that I was back in Colorado. It was the last place I wanted to be. And then amazing things just started happening. I realized anything that and everything I ever wanted to learn was right where I was living all along. But I had to experience all this to make it through to where I was today. And I want to back up because, so the first thing I want to talk about was fear. That we are the ones who create our lives, and so we are the ones that are the controllers of fear and the positive and the negative vibrations. So we can either create the good things that come into our life, or we can create the hardships that come into our life. And on my trip, I had nothing but unwavering faith that I was going to be okay, until I had gotten spooked, and then I allowed that fear to come into my life, and my whole entire trip shifted. But looking back, who knows where my life would have been if it didn't shift that direction. And then going back, when I lived in California, when I first moved there, I had a really hard time finding work. I spent my whole life, or the whole 3 months I lived there, my whole life, it felt like my whole life, I didn't know anybody. I knew one person who was an old teacher of mine in high school, who I fondly love. Lived in this neighboring town where I moved to. So I didn't know anybody. There was, in a community of about 12,000 people, there's probably about 8,000 jobs. So to find work there was really, really challenging. I had paid 3 months advance in my rent. And I spent the next 3 months, day and out, looking for jobs. I probably spent 40 hours a week on foot and on bus in the rain. They have like monsoon rains there. Looking for a job. I would get so close every time, and then I wouldn't get it. So close, wouldn't get it. And finally, I was at the point where I didn't have any money. I didn't have any food. I didn't have any money for food. I wasn't having any leads on any job, and this person comes up to me and says, you need to go to the homeless shelter. And I'm like, I'm not going to be homeless. No way. F that. And they were like, no, you need to go to the homeless shelter and you need to talk to this man. He's going to help you. So I said, finally it was like, fine. So I go into this homeless shelter, and this medium-aged, middle-aged man comes, and I meet him, and we just instantly click and bond. And he tells me, he's like, look, when it comes to work, you cannot be too proud in this town. You have to take what you have. He's like, the next thing is I'm going to get you on food stamps and I'm going to get you health insurance because you don't know when your next check is coming in and we need to make sure that you have food to eat. And me having so much pride in my whole life and always having to work hard for everything I've got, I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, no, you are getting on food stamps and we're getting you health insurance. And he told me that there was a job that he always sees in the paper being a bell ringer for the Salvation Army because it was Christmas time. He's like, you need to go and apply. And I said, no way. And he looked at me down in the eyes and he said, you cannot be too proud. You need to go and apply. So I finally sucked it up and followed all of his advice and walked to the town that I needed to go to, up the long mile, up to this hill. And I go in and I ask for an application and I fill out the application and I go back into the office, which is a room with like 3 or 4 ladies in there. And I hand them my application and they set it down on the stack of papers. And I looked at them and I said, I was like, are those all the applications? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, am I at the top or am I at the bottom? And they're like, oh no, you're at the bottom. And we all just started laughing. And this man walks in and he looks at everyone laughing and he looks at me and he says, you know, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm turning in my application, which seemed pointless because I was at the bottom of like literally probably 100 applications. I mean, the stack was like this thick. And he looks at me and he's like, well, what are you doing in about 20 minutes? And I said, nothing, you know, trying to find a job. And he's like, well, come right back. I want to have an interview with you. And I was just like amazed. So came back, sat in the office, and he looks at me and he's like, I cannot tell you how many people I've interviewed for this job. And he's like, and last night I just prayed and prayed to God, like, to bring me the right person. And he's like, and the minute I walked in and saw your smiling face, I knew you were that right person. Hired me on the spot. I got a job. My first job in California was a bell ringer for the Salvation Army. And it was ridiculous. It was a fun job. It ended up being. I just ended up singing a lot, and I made the most of it. Because he put me at this really, I didn't know it at the time, but it was one of the most high-end stores in the town. But I thought it was the most boring store in the town because nobody ever went there. And so I would just sit out there. It was like this parking lot that faced the field, and nobody was there. So I would sit out there, and I would sing, and I would make up songs, and I would start dancing. And apparently I brought in the most money, and I don't even know how. I didn't even see anyone come in and out, but I did. And then what happened after that is I ended up getting 3 really amazing jobs. I ended up getting a job at Easter Seals, working with challenged children, which special needs children, I should say. They are so special and so beautiful and cute. It was probably the most rewarding, best job I've ever had. And then I got a job working at a dual diagnosis co-ed mental institution, which was also eye-opening. That was a very, very cool job as well. And I worked at a little discount store, which was next to the homeless people that ended up being in the mental institution that I worked at. But the story of that was right before I met that homeless person. I remember walking, and I went across this bridge that was on the farthest side of town that was like the hardest part of the town to get to. And I remember stopping at the bridge, and all this traffic was coming underneath it because it went over this highway. And I just started screaming and crying and just lost it. Of feeling hopeless and helpless and completely beside myself. Like my whole world just crumbled, and I cussed at the world, and I got angry, and I stomped, and I kicked, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And my walls broke because I felt helpless. I felt like my life was going to end, that I was going to be homeless. I wasn't going to have a place to live. And it was about 3 days later that that person came up to me and told me I needed to go to the homeless shelter. That swallowing my pride and trusting, he was probably another one of my guardian angels, and trusting in this earth angel, that my whole entire life changed again. So you never know who is going to be the one that's going to take you to the next place in life. So I guess that's my next step to success is never be too proud, but yet have pride in yourself. It doesn't matter what you do and where you go and what situations you're in. It just matters on the integrity of yourself that you have and the unwavering faith that you're on the right path no matter what, and that you love yourself. So the next thing that I would like to say of success, for this is all about the road to self-success, is I remember when I moved back to town, I didn't have a car, and my dad had this extra car. It was like this really, really old Ford Escort, and it broke down on me constantly in the middle of the road. It's really humbling. I remember being like, we need to find a job, and I was like, Dad, let me take your Jeep, because it's so much cooler than the car, and I don't have any confidence in this car. And he looked at me, and he's like, if you don't have respect in yourself, then you don't have respect in anything else you're driving. He's like, it doesn't matter what you drive. It matters the respect and the love you have for yourself. And at that moment, I was like, amen. Can't argue. So then I went and I took that little piece of wonderful car it was, and found the job that I was looking for. I wanted this waitressing job at this new restaurant in town that was pretty hip and seemed like I could make a ton of money there, which was a good thing. And so that's where I went and got my job in that piece of car. It didn't matter what car I drove. It just mattered the integrity and self-love I had. So the next two things I want to bring up, one is forgiveness and one is deservingness. And I don't know which one I want to go with first. I'm going to go with deservingness. So my rule of deservingness is that it has been shown in my face a lot lately, the word deservingness, of where is it that my deservingness lies, and how much deservingness do I have? And it hasn't been until very recently that I realized I don't know if I have a lot of deservingness. So taking a good long look at that, I decided that that was time to change. And the first thing that I had to do was to go back through my life and look at where it rooted from. And that was interesting to look at, from when I was a little girl to the different times in my life that I felt shut down or rejected. And no big sob story here. I feel like we all have these little moments in our childhood that kind of have left a little mark in our soul and our spirit, of where you felt unworthy of love, unworthy of affection, unworthy of attention, lack of being allowed to deserve the greatest good for yourself. And then what was interesting is, even furthermore, I went to start this video yesterday on Father's Day, and a lot of the deservingness came up. And not that my father doesn't love me, because he very much so loves me, but a lot of it was stemmed from that relationship. And I have a wonderful, wonderful dad, bless him. But looking at that relationship, where, like, I feel there's a large chunk of people in this world who are just more reserved and more quiet and not very open or very communicative or very affectionate, which I'm a very affectionate human being. I love touch. It makes me feel warm and loved inside, and safe when it's in a good way. And I didn't receive a lot of that from him, and that's a big part of who I am. Then it was interesting, because then I started looking at all of my relationships, and the few relationships that have stuck in my mind more so than the other ones, where I was very much so the creator of my relationships, to an extent, that I really lacked deservingness when it came to them. I didn't feel safe with their love because I didn't feel safe that I was good enough to be loved. I didn't feel like they could truly love me because I was unworthy of it. And the interesting thing is every single one of my relationships, the biggest thing I've ever preached to them is self-love. And looking back, it was me who should have been working on my self-love. All the way up to my very last relationship of a man who saw me for who I was, loved me for who I was, walked lots of different paths with me in the 3 years we were together. But I never could truly 100% feel his love because I lacked deservingness. And so with all of that, I had to go back through and forgive all of those moments in my life where I felt denied felt denied love, felt denied worthiness, felt denied attention, felt denied affection, felt denied unconditional love. And I had to go through and really forgive all of those past memories and fill them in with love and forgiveness and deservingness, my self-deservingness of me being a little girl being denied love and having to look at my little girl of myself and fill her in with love, of unconditional love from divine source or from my source. So that would be the next thing, is that I really encourage everyone to take a moment to really look at their deservingness. What is their deservingness in their life and in their career and their relationships, of their self? And then to forgive those moments when you did, because those moments can be the moments that are holding you back from creating the greatest thing that you could ever be. And then the fifth would be self-love. And I tell this to so many people, and it's because I have to do it to myself. I'm usually very full of self-love. I do find a lot of my self-worth, despite my last story. When I'm single and not in a relationship, I have a lot more self-worth and a lot more deservingness than when I am in a relationship, because... Actually, that's a good question. I'll have to get back to that. Yeah. Anyways, but my self-love, I really have to think about that one. But my self-love, and so this is what I tell all of my clients that I see in my readings, is go look in that mirror and look yourself in the eyes and truly look at your soul, because the eyes are the gateway to your soul. And look in those eyes, the beautiful eyes of yourself, for they are only yours, and say, I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. And say it, and say it, and say it, until you truly feel that you mean it, and that you can truly feel the love for yourself inside. And the other thing I tell them to go and do, because I feel like, especially women, I don't know that much with men, because I mostly work with women, but I'm sure men have the same thing, because I'm sure if they had to shave their legs, they would see cellulite on their legs too. But, you know, women, we have so much image that we have to hold up to. You know, having the beautiful, perfect face, to having a good figure, to having the perfect size of chest, and the perfect size of rear end, and not having cellulite, and blah, 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 blah. And I just say, fuck all that shit. You have one body in this life, and if you don't love your body, who in the world is going to love it? You have to love those curves, and who cares about those dimples? I like to call them where Cupid stuck his bow and arrow on you. Obviously, you just really loved because he stuck his bow and arrow on you a lot and gave you lots of little dimples of love kisses. And who knows? One man might like a really skinny girl, and the next man might like a much more bigger girl. Don't ever let yourself judge what a man's going to think of you. The only thing that you can judge is what you think of yourself. So I would tell a man this too, but I haven't had the opportunity. But now I will. Go get some sexy lingerie, pull out that full-length mirror, turn on the music, shut the blinds if you like, or open them, your preference, and dance your ass off to your sexy self. Go out there and get it. And love it. Touch your body. Feel it. This is your body. This is the one thing that God gave you in this world that is just yours. You own it. You get to love it. You get to nourish it. You get to feel it. And you get to be with it. Love that body of yours. And get sexy with it. And I think it's one of the greatest things in the world. And it's great when I see my repeat clients come back and I'm like, did you get in front of that mirror? Did you do the naughty? And they're like, yes, I did. And you can see like their face is just glowing. I'm like, that's what that's all about. That is the self-love, and that is the growth of becoming who you are, loving who you are, standing up for your voice. Now, with that, I have to tell you that I've gone through a lot of new experiences lately, and each new person I meet, because I have recently in the last 3.5 months become single, it's been quite a whirlpool, and each new person I meet, I really take it as an opportunity to learn from them of who I am, because I'm realizing this is the 6th thing. I know I'm only supposed to do 5 things of success, but this is the 6th thing, is the magic. There is so much magic everywhere, and I don't know if you can see this beautiful water behind me. I'm sure you can, but I hope a pelican flies behind me at some point. I really love pelicans, and there's lots of beautiful white pelicans. They actually live just over there a little bit, but it's really interesting because each person that I have met, I've met about 5 different males that have lasted with a conversation of a day or one small day, like nothing big, right? But each one in those short experiences, whether it be a half an hour, a whole day of communicating, I've realized so much about who I am, where I am, what I'm thinking, directly brings in the man that I am drawing into my life. And the last one was probably the most phenomenal because I realized, 1, I'm getting closer, but 2, to who I really want to be. Because it's all about growth and changing, baby. Nobody's perfect, but you're just perfectly perfect for yourself. That I lacked a lot of confidence, and it pisses me off. And then the silly thing was just like, why? Like, and what was even more funny was when I would talk to him and I would get embarrassed about something, I would mumble. I didn't even know I did this. And he would stop me and be like, you're mumbling, I can't understand you. And I was like, damn it. In my head, I'm thinking, damn it. I was trying to like sneak that little thing in without it being too big of a deal. And he's like, no, you need to repeat that next time without mumbling. So I take a deep breath, put on my big girl pants, and like say it again, and he'd be like, you're still mumbling. And of course I'm like, fuck, damn it, I really don't want to say this. And yes, I do cuss a little bit, so forgive me if you need to. Because I don't always find cussing being a bad thing. There's moments when it's not a good thing, but sometimes it's really liberating. And so I had to take in that deep breath and suck it up again and be like, okay. And I would say it again, and this time I would say it clearly, and he would hear me. And he would laugh and be like, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel the same way. And it was like, oh my God, wow, like what a relief. But then the next best part was that it made me realize that some things that I'm shy about saying, I don't truly need to be shy about at all. That it could be the next best thing that came out of my mouth. Who knows? Who knew? And that the great thing about him was that I felt insecure, like I felt not worthy. Amazing that, right? But and with what I do for a living, I realized that it's not in everybody's boat. Which is always so alarming to me. I'm like, what do you mean? What? You like don't believe in God and spirits and angels and spirit guides, and you don't believe that like people pass over? Like, I don't get this, but whatever, they probably don't get me half the time, and I have to just realize that. Which I really do think that they should, because it's like the most amazing thing I've ever stepped into in my life. That it's equally as amazing for them. But that with him, I really had to bring my confidence up and my self-worth and speak my truth to him. And the next best thing was, in my past relationships, my sassiness has been sort of a hardship for the men I've been with, because I'm a little opinionated, and sometimes I just want to tell you to leave me alone, or that you're not being nice, but I don't say it in the nicest way. And I'm so frustrated that I don't have the moment of clarity to say in the nicest way. And so with him, it showed me that he liked that part, and he would call me right back out on it. And it was like, oh, the story of this success is that I didn't have to change 10 things about my personality to be perfectly in love with this man. I needed to change the man that was not perfectly in love with the 10 things about my personality. So never justify your self-worth for another human being who doesn't like who you are. Get rid of that person and find the person that does love who you are. Because there's no... Because there's no time in wasting when you've got a whole world of love ahead of you to give. You just need to find the right person who can take you for who you are and accept you for that. So my 5 things of success, which has led into a little bit more, is you're the choice and the feeder of the fear in your life. So you get to choose if you want to feed the fear or if you want to feed the faith in your life. Second, never give up, because there's always somebody above you looking out after you, like God, like your angels, your spirit guide. You can always ask them for help. Third, what is your deservingness? How much do you feel like you can actually deserve something? And if you don't feel like you can deserve it, then you need to look again and again until you feel like you truly do deserve it. 4, what are the areas in your life and the people that you can forgive? And forgive yourself above anything. Forgive yourself. That's probably the hardest. For the things that you did wrong, because every failure is a success. And if you could look at it that way, look at everything, every hardship you've had in your life and what lessons you can learn from it, that's a good place to start. And self-love, what is your self-love? And are you finding the magic in everyday life? Because you're drawing the people to you for a reason. You're drawing the people to you on the level of, because they're matching you on the level of your love, your self-love, the love that you put out into the world, your deservingness, and your ability to forgive. If you can work on all 3 of those, you'll probably find that the people in your life that don't have those will fall away, and they're usually the ones that are causing the most hardship in your life. And you'll find yourself around new people that also live on this higher vibration of self-love, self-deservingness, the ability to forgive, a fearless heart, and faith. That wind keeps making me inhale my hair. Makes you humble. And to put amusement in it. That's a great one to add at the end. To put amusement in it. Because for goodness sakes, love who you are, be who you are, live fearlessly, with faith, and an abundance of deservingness. Love and light to you all, and may you all find the best place that you need to be in your life. Thank you. Melissa Wendell with Earth Feather Healings in Longmont, Colorado. And you can find me you can email me at windme33@yahoo, which is WIND, like wind that keeps blowing my hair in my face. Me, as in me, 33@yahoo.com. May you be perfectly perfect you. Thank you. Blessed days.